like Ed Iskandarian, Joe Lanati, Stu Hilburn Fuel Injection, Bob Stange, Strange Engineering, Herb McCandless. We were looking for 8 3/4 Chrysler Rivian, couldn't find one. I called Herb, who was Mr. 4-Speed, and over in the Carolinas, and he said, Raymond, he said, I've got a housing and a third member. I'll send you. It'll be UPS tomorrow. You'll have it. You can send it to Strange or whatever you want to do to get it done. I'd be delighted to send that to you. Well, Herb and so many other people have helped us put this project together. I had the crank, I had the block, I had heads. We got Leo Goff to help us do the valve job to save time on the thing. We used a lot of old parts. We got old clutch parts. Had a brand new 40-year-old Schiefer flywheel. We had 12 40-something-year-old Vinolia pistons for stock stroke. I had 3 stock stroke cranks, push rods, valves, pressure plates, clutches, stands, disc, and we just dug down in the barrels and the boxes at the house because a lot of my friends think I'm real cheap. Don't want to buy nothing, but I don't throw anything away. And all them old pieces that were laying there for all that time, we pulled them out, revamped them, redid them, re-chromed, adjusted, modified. It does fire up, it does run, it sounds great, and we have enjoyed very much doing that.
Preston, I understand you made a lot of those pieces on there by hand, like the brake handle and the...
Yeah, he said I was too cheap to do a new starter deal, and I talked to my boy at RCH, which we kept the old starter that we used on the funny car. It's just laying on the shelf. We tried to buy some new pieces, but none of it coincided with what we had. So we took a pattern of the starter brackets on the funny car, and I taught Preston everything he knew about running a lathe and a mill, which was bought all the material, and him and Scott finally hewed it out, and then told me how great he was that he fixed a piece of aluminum with all my equipment and the money I spent on all this crap, and he wants the credit for all of it.
Well, that's not true. That's not true. I gave him the accolades about what he did.
What about the nose piece? Did you form that? Tell us how that happened.
Well, the nose piece, we were faxing. Scott sat down at the drawing table at my office, and he drew a chassis just about the scale of a 196-inch wheelbase chassis, and for a month, like Raymond said previously, we would fax that drawing down to TC at Garlitz's, and in a day or so it would come back with all kinds of dimensions on it,
specifications,
and of exactly how Cochran's car and Weeby's car was.
So we took the happy medium and the 500 pictures that we had, and all the albums and stuff that Frida had put together, all during Preston's and my career in Top Fuel deal, and we ended up with the close similarity, the same front wheels, the same American 5-spoke torque thrust rear wheels, narrowed Chrysler rear end, the original bell housing, the original drive shaft, original clutch pieces, torsion front end, all of that stuff is original on it, and it's turned out great, and we're tickled to death with it. And Garnett's come by Friday after we got it unloaded and couldn't believe how good it looked, and he went back and told TC, he said, my God, he said, how did they do it? He said, who did the aluminum work? He said, they did. He said, well, who built the chassis? He said, they did. And he said, TC said, they did it all, Don. He said, well, they're in the wrong business. They ought to be building chassis. And then TC came down a little later and told me what Don had said. And he came down and he said, well, I'll tell you what the old man said, but he probably won't tell you because he don't want to give you that credit for it. But he said it sure was a nice piece and he'd like to have it in the museum. So that's the way it goes. I went down the next day and visited Gartlett's for a while, and he told me the same thing that he had told TC. TC stood back and winked and we laughed. But anyway, that's about where we are on that. We've got it together. We've had fun with it. We fired it up 4 or 5 times. And Preston's worse than a kid with a new toy at Christmas.
Preston, when Gartlett's looked at the car, what did he say? He said there was something wrong with it, wasn't it?
Oh yeah. I went down there and he said, well, the only thing I could see about the car that I think you need to change. And I said, what's that? And he said, the rebel flag's not big enough and it's not clean enough. And I said, well, Don, that's the same rebel flag that was on that car the last pass I made on it back in '71. And I said, my wife's had it in the scrapbook and it's got the black VHT all over it, and that's what's going to stay on it.
And it's got all the phrase where the wind tore it apart and running 220.
Yeah, and when I told him that, he said that's the one that needed to be on it.
Well, who repainted all the cartoon on there and that sort of thing?
Well, that was Paul Cosma. I had the drawing that Rick Mendez drew in 1970 of that picture on the cow. And I took that original drawing down to Cosma and I told him, I said, now, you know, I've had this for 40 years. Means a lot to me. Guard it with your life because it could be your life if you lose it. And I was joking with Paul and he laughed. But I'm going to tell you, he did a fantastic job on it. And I was totally surprised when I looked at it. He had Rick Mendez's name signed at the bottom of it. And I said,
70.
And it had 70 on it. And I said, Paul, why'd you put his name on it? He said, because the way I feel about it is we're both artists and we both deserve the respect that we do. And I get to looking on the car and I can't find Cosma's name on it anywhere. And finally, I was up working on the front end and that gold leaf comes down to a point and that red comes down there. Well, right at the very bottom underneath the nose, it looked like his paintbrush had gotten off and I didn't have my glasses on. So I asked Scott, my son, I said, what is the deal down here? And he looked down there and he said, you're not going to believe it, but that's where Cosma signed it. And I thought that was pretty neat too. We've had a lot of good help from good friends. And Raymond knows a lot of good people all over the country, and without their help, this project wouldn't have been completed. We worked long hours. I have thrashed harder on this car than I did when I was racing. And so has Raymond. And, you know, we just feel like it was a big group that put it together. Not one person did it. Now, Raymond was the most important part of this project by far, but
well, the only thing there, Preston, I just really couldn't believe that I could get all that done for $1,000.
I didn't either, and
so much for that.
Right.
Well, y'all took all 3 of these cars to Bowling Green, and that was a test.
And I'm gonna tell you something. You know, we got about halfway through with it, and Raymond and I were talking one day, and he said, you know, we might just ought to, if we get this fielder done, we might just ought to take one of them. I said, no, I don't want to go up there if we can't take them all 3, because I honestly feel like that all 3 of those cars were a great honor to hit Raymond's past of drag racing, and everybody up there I talked to said the same thing. We had his car he ran in '62. We had the fueler and we had the funny car, As far as I'm concerned, and I'm not saying it because I was part of it, but to me that was a highlight of the reunion. To me, that's the way it was. You know, a lot of people looked at those cars and they couldn't believe that those 3 cars were sitting there.
So that's just a little background of where we started on this project. Hope that this has been interesting and gives everybody a little background of some of the history of a little bit of the Tennessee Boll Weevil and the group of guys from Memphis that had a lot of fun, and we did it because we wanted to. We wasn't trying to prove anything to anybody other than the fact that we could build a decent, pretty car, run pretty quick, and have a lot of fun, and I think we've done all of that. Thank you.
Very good. Very good.
Hurry up, it's 5 o'clock.